The wind pushed against the half-built, shelter like it, wanted to knock it down before it ever had a chance to stand. Anna wiped the back of her hand across her forehead, smearing dirt into the sweat, and forced another crooked board into place. Every plank she used had been scavenged from the wreckage of the old barn, splintered, warped, and crusted with memories she didn't want but couldn't outrun. Her fingers trembled not from the cold, but from the weight of working alone, really, truly alone for the first time since the night Daniel died. She hammered hard, the thud echoing across the property like a heartbeat that wasn't hers anymore. The field beyond was nothing but gray winter grass, swaying with the wind's cruel rhythm. She kept her eyes low, not wanting to look at the empty spaces where Daniel used to stand, not wanting to think about the plans they'd drawn together, not wanting to feel the sharpness of being left behind. And then she felt it, a presence, not imagined, not a ghost of grief, but real, solid, watching. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. She'd recognize that stillness anywhere. Mark Daniel's brother, the man who hadn't shown his face at the funeral, the man who disappeared when the family needed him most, the man who'd held more secrets than words, more silence than comfort. He stood at the edge of the field, boots planted like he had roots there, hands shoved in his coat pockets, as if he were trying to look, casual and failing miserably at it. His jaw tightened when she finally lifted her gaze to him. His eyes, Daniel's eyes, but colder, locked on the broken boards in her hands. "You're doing that wrong," he said, voice steady but low. Anna felt a hot flare of anger shoot up her spine. "Then don't stand there watching. Either help or leave." Mark didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, it seemed. The silence stretched so long she almost believed he'd disappear again, vanish like he always did. But then, with a slow exhale, he stepped toward her. His boots crunched over the dead grass. His shadow fell over her and the shelter. And for the first time in months, she felt the air shift. Something was coming, rising, breathing between them, something old and unfinished. The storm rolled in before dawn, a low rumble crawling across the sky like it was warning the world to brace itself. Anna woke to the sound of wind battering the half-built shelter, each gust slapping the boards as if testing her resolve. She sat up in her small, cold house, heart already pounding with the anxiety she wished she could silence. Today mattered. Today was the day she'd either see progress or watch the only thing she had left collapse. She pulled on her coat and boots quickly, barely noticing the chill biting at her fingers. The air outside was sharp enough to cut. The sky was the color of bruised steel, the kind of morning Daniel used to tease her about. "Bad weather builds character," he'd say, even while pulling her closer to keep her warm. The memory stung like a fresh wound. But Anna forced herself forward because grief didn't build shelters. Grief didn't split firewood. Grief didn't keep you alive in a world that didn't care how broken you were. She reached the shelter and froze. Mark was already there. He stood with his coat unzipped, hair damp from the mist, sleeves rolled up, and a hammer in his hand like he'd been working for hours. Several of the broken boards she had left scattered the night before were already reinforced, straightened, nailed into place with a precision that made her chest tighten. For a fleeting moment, she saw Daniel in him, not in appearance, but in the quiet way he worked, in the way he stepped back to assess his progress, in the stubborn commitment to finishing something that mattered. Anna swallowed. "You didn't have to come back." Mark didn't look at her at first. He drove one last nail, the crack of metal echoing in the empty morning air, before he finally turned. "I know." His voice was rough, like he'd been talking to the wind since sunrise. "I came anyway." She didn't know what to say. She wasn't ready to forgive him. She wasn't ready to understand him. She wasn't ready for the storm inside her, the one that trembled every time he was near. Mark bent to pick up another board, examining the splintered edge. "These aren't good enough. They'll break again next time the wind gets serious." "They're all I have," she said, frustration flaring. Mark looked up, steady and unshaken. "Then we'll make them stronger." The simplicity of the words hit her harder than she expected. Because Daniel used to say that too. For a moment the wind softened, just barely. Anna stepped closer, her breath mixing with the cold air. Something heavy pressed behind her ribs. Grief, uncertainty, maybe something else trying to wake up. "Why are you really here, Mark?" she asked, voice low. He hesitated. His silence stretched, not empty this time, but full, almost overflowing with something he'd kept buried for far too long. Then quietly he said, "Because I should have been here long before now." Anna's pulse kicked. The storm above them cracked faintly, a distant rumble rolling through the clouds. But the storm between them, oh, that one was closer, heavier, alive. Before she could respond, the wind slammed against the shelter so hard the boards groaned. Mark grabbed her arm and pulled her back just as one of the support beams shuddered. His touch burned through her coat. "Stay behind me," he said. The command, the protectiveness, the closeness, everything hit her like a wave. Amid as the storm closed in, Anna realized something unsettling, something she didn't want to name. She wasn't afraid of the wind anymore. She was afraid of what Mark might be waking inside her. The storm finally broke sometime after midnight, leaving behind a world soaked, raw, and eerily quiet. The earth still trembled under Anna's boots as she walked out at first light, her breath steaming in the morning air. The shelter looked battered but standing because Mark had stayed. She didn't know when he finally left, only that she'd fallen asleep at the table, waiting for the sound of the door that never opened. But now, as she stepped outside, she saw him. Mark sat on the fallen log near the fence, head bowed, hands hanging loosely between his knees. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. The early sun carved gold across his shoulders, but nothing lit his eyes. They stayed fixed on the ground, on something she couldn't see. Anna approached slowly. It felt like approaching a wild animal, wounded, proud, unpredictable. "You stayed late," she said quietly. Mark didn't answer right away. His jaw flexed once, tight, like he was swallowing something he'd kept buried too long. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't want it coming down on you." Something warm flickered inside her chest, unwanted, dangerous, growing too fast. "It didn't," she murmured, "thanks to you." He shook his head. "Not thanks to me. I should have been here before the storm ever hit. Before you had to do any of this alone." A fragile silence stretched between them, the kind that felt like stepping onto thin ice. Anna sat beside him, leaving a careful distance. "You keep saying you should have been here." She kept her voice steady. "Then why weren't you?" Mark stared out at the shelter, the broken boards, the land that still carried Daniel's shadow. When he finally answered, his voice cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just raw enough to make her chest ache. "Because I thought staying away would make things easier for you." He exhaled shakily. "For both of us." Anna frowned. "Easier how?" He dragged a hand through his hair, like he hated every word he was about to say. "Because every time I looked at you, I remembered what I almost had." And what he got instead. Anna's breath caught. The world stilled. The wind died. Even the birds seemed to hold their tongues. She stared at him, pulse hammering, voice barely a whisper. "Mark, what are you saying?" He finally lifted his gaze to her, and it was a confession all by itself. "A storm stronger than any that had beaten the land last night. I loved you first." "Anna?" The words hit her like a breaking wave. She felt them in her chest, in her ribs, in every memory she'd ever tucked away. She felt Daniel's ghost between them, and yet, impossibly, she felt something else, something alive. "I didn't say anything," Mark continued, voice rough, "because Daniel saw you. He chose you, and he was my brother, and you looked at him like he hung the stars." He swallowed hard, so I stepped back. I stayed out of the way, and when he died, I couldn't come here without feeling like I was stealing something that was never mine. Anna's eyes stung. The morning light blurred. She didn't move. Didn't trust herself to. "Mark!" She exhaled his name like it carried the weight of the entire year she'd spent, trying to survive. "Why tell me this now? Because watching you struggle alone was killing me." Mark's voice cracked again. "And because pretending I don't care is getting harder every day." Anna's heart thundered, louder than the storm, louder than grief, louder than reason. She looked away, unable to meet the force in his gaze. "I'm not ready," she said softly. "I know, I'm still hurting, I know. And I can't replace him." Mark turned fully toward her. "I'm not asking you to." She closed her eyes. The sunlight warmed her face, but her hands were cold. Thoughts collided, loyalty, guilt, longing, fear, and something she didn't dare name. Mark stood slowly and took one step toward the shelter. "But I'm here now," he said, quiet but sure. For however long you'll let me be. Anna didn't call him back. Didn't stop him, didn't move. But her breath trembled. Not from sadness this time, but from the terrifying possibility that she wasn't as alone as she thought.